Welcome back to more World Cup fantasy content. This will be my team selection for Matchday 4 using unlimited transfers, and we all get a 5 million increase to our budget. There are no changes to the player prices, and that's all covered in my How to Play World Cup fantasy video. But let's go through the fixtures one by one. Germany versus Paraguay and France versus Sweden, as I discussed in my first draft video yesterday. South Africa versus Canada was confirmed fairly early. The same goes for the Netherlands facing Morocco, and Portugal will face Croatia after finishing second in their group, and Spain are up against Austria after that 3-3 thriller between Austria and Algeria. USA will play Bosnia, with Belgium versus Senegal. Brazil are up against Japan, and Ivory Coast will be up against Norway this time round, with the host Mexico, or at least one of the hosts, facing Ecuador. England will be facing Congo, Argentina against Cape Verde, Australia versus Egypt, Switzerland versus Iran, and Colombia, the group winners, are up against Ghana. So you can also see the potential round of 16 fixtures. That's very important if you have no wildcard in your back pocket. I used that chip on Matchday 3. I'll discuss my performance and delve into the good things that happened there, and also a few missed opportunities, if you will, in the review section towards the beginning, and some transfer plans in every single position, highlighting the key moves I can make to bolster my knockout stage prospects and to build a very solid foundation there for the rest of the tournament. For the winners of Colombia versus Ghana and Switzerland versus Iran will face each other. The same goes for Argentina against Cape Verde. The winner of that will face either Australia or Egypt. And with England versus Congo, they will face Mexico or Ecuador. Ivory Coast or Norway will be up against Brazil or Japan. I'm not going to go through every single sort of possibility going into the quarterfinals and beyond. Otherwise, we'll be here for a very long time. Belgium versus Senegal. The winner of that will be up against USA or Bosnia. Spain versus Austria will face Portugal or Croatia. Netherlands or Morocco will be up against South Africa or Canada. And then France or Sweden will face Germany or Paraguay. So there are some mouth-watering games on the horizon, particularly in the round of 16 and beyond. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Which match are you most looking forward to from a non-fantasy perspective? And when it comes to this game, which countries are you looking to load up on? And what's the ultimate structure? Are you using a chip on Matchday 4? My recommendation is to utilize the Qualification Booster. I think it's the best time to use that chip. And then with the Clean Sheet Shield, which was revealed as the mystery chip, I'd probably look at Matchday 5 or 6 instead. And it's all talked about in my chip strategy video as well. Be sure to drop a like on this one, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, not just for World Cup fantasy, but also FPL and New CL fantasy, which I'll cover very soon going into next season. And the aim is to get this video to the 200 likes on YouTube as we close in on 40k subscribers on the platform. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Chumships, further access to my videos, proud to powder comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the World Cup Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The last match day of the group stages was very mixed bag in my opinion. It might not have been as terrible as match day 1 was for me, and definitely there was some progress made on match days 2 and 3. But at least I went for Pickford as my goalkeeper. I was very confident in England keeping a clean sheet against Panama, and they did so in a 2-0 victory there, which saw them top Group L, and they're in a good position now for the knockout stages. But it wasn't just Pickford I went for in that England team, because I also had Konsa and a back 5 in the end, which is very rare for me, even in World Cup fantasy. Doué was a very good differential in that 2-0 win against Curaçao, so he also acquired the scouting bonus, which was very handy. But going for Chadi Riyad over Hakimi was very frustrating, and ultimately that was to fund another premium in the midfield, and that flopped big time. So I would have gained even more points and surpassed 100 plus very easily if I went for Hakimi and a cheaper midfielder than the one you're going to see very soon. Otamendi blanked, and he was very close to scoring against Jordan, but he was offside anyway. It was a 3-1 win for Argentina. Messi came off the bench and did his thing, but it was a heavily rotated side, and yet they could still field the likes of Alvarez and Lautaro Martinez up top. And I have to say, Alvarez has been very disappointing in this tournament so far. It's about time he steps up in the round of 32 and beyond. But Otamendi pretty much plays well for Argentina most of the time, And there are a few Boza moments he has. He's not going to be a regular starter for the round of 32 and beyond, but I still think Otamendi can come off the bench and shore things up in certain matches, but you always have to be careful. And he is, of course, at a very ripe age, you could say, if that's even a thing, to be fair, because he is approaching the end of his career, but definitely a very underrated figure in the Argentinian national team. And Denzel Dumfries just offers that pure excitement from a fantasy perspective with the goals and the assists. He got a very early assist for an own goal scored by Tunisia, and the Netherlands won 3-1, but after being 2-0 up inside 6 minutes, I was expecting much more from Denzel Dumfries and the other Dutch players I had, but Mohamed Salah, who is on my bench, was a massive disappointment, and the midfielders once again let me down. That's where I'm losing out on points at the moment. My defensive picks have been quite reasonable for the most part. The same goes for the forwards and even goalkeepers, but where I'm missing out on is definitely this position. Vinicius Jr., though, delivered 15 points. He has been brilliant in this tournament with 4 goals and an assist, and also Saibari, who I did captain originally over Vinicius, which was a mistake of mine because I was always in the Vinicius camp at the beginning, and then I was tempted by the Haiti fixture. Saibari missed some big opportunities, then made up for it, but Vinicius Jr. outscored him quite comfortably in the end. But in a 5-0 win for Senegal, which was a record breaker for African teams, well, Mane didn't get a single goal or assist. He was such a frustrating asset, and in the first half, he looked the most likely from any Senegalese player to get something, but in the end, he was a massive disappointment, just like Mohamed Salah and another midfielder who's on my bench as well. But these two forwards, Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe, well, they are brilliant options in their own right. You all know this by now. And for me, they are two must-haves in the knockout stages. You can, of course, go for a slightly cheaper forward instead of one of those two. And there is Harry Kane, who ended up hauling inevitably against Panama just before being subbed off. But it was Bellingham who won a second consecutive Player of the Match award, or whatever they even call it, in this tournament. And that is very interesting to say the least. He got the goal and assist against Panama, but I think Harry Kane is still the best England asset overall. And on my bench, you can see Mpassi from Congo. He actually blanked, and Congo went down 1-0 against Uzbekistan before winning 3-1 and finishing top amongst all third-place teams. So that was a very impressive win for them, and every single African team has advanced to the next round. But I also had Salah, Somerville, and yes, the one time I actually get him in, he blanks because he was a massive regret of mine from Matchday 2 when I went for Yeboah instead, and Somerville in a brief cameo got a goal and assist. The other one was Cody Gakpo up front. So the Dutch really let me down, and when it comes to Sadio Mane and Salah, I think those are the two most frustrating figures for me, and the midfield is where I've lost out on so many points in this tournament. But in the end, 87 isn't too shabby. It's another green arrow to around 136k, but I definitely want to enter the top 100k, and I think I'll do so in the round of 32 with the squad I've built, and the qualification booster will be active. So for those that are unaware, that gives you 2 additional points for every single player in your starting 11 if that team advances to the next round, and it's much easier to use that chip now and gain more points from it in the round of 32 compared to latter rounds of the competition. Now, with the clean sheet shield, you could argue that games are tighter and lower scoring in the latter stages of the competition, but with the maximum captain, if you still have it like myself, I think that is best used on match day 7 or 8, where you can only switch to captaincy once because there are 2 matches. And yes, you might be thinking, what are the matches there on match day 8? Well, there is the third place playoff, of course. It's not like the Euros or UCL Fantasy, so you can make substitutions and change the captaincy, but only once, and that's why things become even more difficult by that stage of the tournament. But what about transfers in each position? Well, Emi Martinez, who I talked about buying for matchday 3, I'm happy I didn't do so in the end because Argentina conceded, but I'm very confident they can keep multiple clean sheets in the knockout rounds, and Cape Verde have been very impressive in this tournament. They're undefeated. They drew 0-0 against Spain, and yes, they haven't won a match, but they can cause Argentina problems by being very defensively resolute, and it will take the genius of Messi and also a team effort to really break them down and get the job done. But I think Emi Martinez and Argentina will be right up there for the clean sheet odds. They might even be top, so I wouldn't mind a defensive double up, but not a triple up because that means you don't have Lionel Messi in your squad. So Mpassi will make way. I have no interest in having any Congolese assets against England. and Dumfries will also be sold, probably for Joshua Kimmich, but this isn't locked in for me because at a similar price, I can cover the Spanish defence, which looks much more defensively resolute than Germany, and Spain are another country, like Argentina and Mexico, who haven't conceded a single goal. They are the only three countries to have been so solid defensively. Actually, what am I even saying? Argentina did concede, so there are two nations left. Pardon my ignorance there. I was staying up until very late watching the Argentina game, but I somehow missed it. Maybe the bias is kicking in there for me as well. But Joshua Kimmich at 5.5 million. He has been a bit underwhelming in this tournament, I will say that, in terms of fantasy prospects. He got a few attacking returns against Curaçao, but against Ivory Coast and Ecuador, conceding in those two games, I mean, it's quite surprising that Germany even went that strong in the first place because they had secured top spot already. Let's see if that cost them, because they had one of the quickest turnarounds between match days 3 and 4 compared to any other country. Even the manager was complaining about that. But against Paraguay, who are very solid defensively, yet they also probably lack that quality in the attacking third, I think Germany have a great chance of keeping a clean sheet, and Kimmich is on set pieces as well. The Netherlands versus Morocco is also quite difficult to tell in terms of who's going to go through. I'd probably back the Netherlands there, but only just, and that's why Bari does make way for a budget midfielder. Now, this could be Leandro Trossard, who got a massive return against New Zealand, and he has less than 5% ownership, but so does Manzambi and Vargas. Having one of those Switzerland midfielders could certainly work for you. Their minutes aren't entirely secure, and they can be subbed off quite early. Even on match day 1, Manzambi didn't start, but I think he's a very interesting option here if you're backing Switzerland to beat Algeria and to potentially go quite far in this tournament. They might even face Argentina, and that's one of the most likely quarterfinalists, but football is full of surprises. So Manzambi is definitely on the agenda. And up front, Gakpo will be sold for Harry Kane. I'm going for that template front three, which I discussed in my first draft. That part is almost locked in when it comes to my World Cup fantasy team. The forward line, I mean, we all know the three names that are probably going to be the very best in this tournament. I think it's much more difficult to lock in the midfield and defence, and that's where you can be a bit differential, have a few scouting bonus opportunities, and gain those points over your mini-league rivals, and to get those green arrows to finish in your desired rank. So with all of this in mind, this is my team selection for Matchday 4. It's not fully locked in. Tune into the deadline stream later today to see my final squad. But Magnan could be one of my goalkeepers facing Sweden. I don't trust that French defence that much, to be honest, but the reason why I'm going for Magnan is because I back France to go very far in this tournament. They look like the best overall squad at the moment, and I think they'll reach the semi-finals minimum, and basically the winner between them and Spain could determine the actual winner of the entire World Cup. But Magnan did save the penalty against Norway, and it was a very heavily rotated Norway side, but France won 4-1, and Magnan produced a return despite conceding. And on match day 2, he kept the clean sheet against Iraq. You've got Saliba at 5.3 million in that defence, but Theo Hernandez is a slight rotation risk, so I'd probably go for Magnan if you really want that French defensive coverage. And I'm going for a back three here of Cucurella, who only cost 5.1 million in this game. If Laporte had less than 5% ownership, I'd be going for him. And he's actually the highest scoring defender in World Cup fantasy, and Laporte has been very good for me, at least for match day 2. But against Austria, who are a decent side, I still think Spain will advance, and their defence is quite underrated. I think Spain need a bit more in the attack right now, and they're not scoring that many goals. Obviously, against Saudi Arabia, it was a 4-0 win, but a goalless draw against Cape Verde, and they beat Uruguay 1-0. But what really stands out to me right now is their defence. Their goalkeeper isn't great, Unai Simon, but in World Cup fantasy terms, he could be a solid pick, and that's an alternative to Magnan, and that could also mean Saliba over Cucurella, or I go for a different defender entirely. I wouldn't even mind having two defenders from England, and that could include Pickford in goal with Konsa, and he was very good for me, of course, on match day 3. He got scouting bonus against Panama. He currently has 3% ownership, but I think his figure will rise to maybe above 5%, so I'm not sure if he will stay a scouting bonus opportunity for the round of 32 and beyond. And Freeman is still a differential, but it's 7% ownership for him. You also have Serginho Dest, who essentially plays as a winger, and Chris Richards is the scouting bonus opportunity in that American backline. So I wouldn't mind any single one of those three, and maybe I'll go to Chris Richards at 0.1 million more. I've actually got that left over in the bank, so if I wanted to chase the extra 2 points, and I'm not expecting Freeman to get the attacking contributions he did in the group stages when it comes to the knockouts. So it's either Serginho Dest maybe, who's a bit more expensive, or I go for the differential, the pure one, in Chris Richards as well. But you don't want to be too bogged down in terms of less than 5% ownership and scouting bonus all the time, because there are so many examples like Daniel Munoz against other Colombian defenders that sometimes it's worth spending the extra millions on the attacking asset, and Serginho Dest would be that in the American defense. Now, with Mexico, you might be thinking, why not them? I think Ecuador is a much tougher opposition than Bosnia, and I think Mexico aren't guaranteed to go through to the round of 16. Ecuador aren't great offensively, I've always said that, but they are probably one of the best defenses in the world, in my opinion. They've got great individual names like Bacho and Hincapié, but as a unit, they are so tough to break down. So I think with Mexico, Ecuador, especially if you're using the qualification booster on Matchday 4, I'd rather have an American defender. I'm very confident they will advance to the next round, and they were a bit shaky against Turkey after rotating quite heavily, but for the first 2 games, they were quite impressive. So I think an American defender will make it into my final squad as a facilitator and enabler, because I want some big names in the midfield and forward line. Manzambi won't be one of them. He's another example of that. He costs 5.6 million, so he is there to also allow me to buy Ousmane Dembele, who scored a hat-trick, and that was really impressive against Norway. Yes, it was a rotated side by Norway, but France just have so many great attackers that they can bring off the bench, and Ousmane Dembele will not be on the bench, of course. He's going to be a regular starter. He hasn't really done that well for France over the years. He even conceded a penalty in a World Cup final against Argentina, but both him and Vinicius Jr. are doing really well in this tournament, despite not really doing it for their countries over the past couple of years. They've always been very consistent for their clubs, but that hasn't been the case for France and Brazil respectively. But now they are doing it, and they're certainly justifying that 10 million price tag. But that means no Lamine Yamal at the moment. I'm definitely not going for Salah, even if he does well for Matchday 4. I'd rather have Yamal and these two when it comes to the pure premiums. And you can't write off Elise. He's getting quite a few assists, but in terms of goal scoring, I think Ousmane Dembele is on another level. And Jude Bellingham has produced returns now in several matches against Croatia and Panama. So I think he's an interesting option at 8.3 million. I was considering him before the haul on Matchday 3. And with England facing Congo, who are a solid side, I wouldn't write them off. I still think England will advance, and it's worth doubling or tripling up on the Three Lions. Now, Florian Wirtz is an interesting one because he has a good record for Germany overall, but in this tournament, no goals, 2 assists, and no standout returns. Against Curaçao in a 7-1 win, he only got 5 points, which is quite disappointing. Against Ecuador, he got the assist in that controversial goal, which gave them the lead, and I'm quite open to revisiting that Wirtz pick, and even Manzambi to a certain extent, so maybe I'll cover the German attack or midfield with the Mecha over Manzambi, and I can go for Trossard or maybe Vargas instead of Florian Wirtz. So that isn't fully locked in for me. And Luis Diaz is only a bit more expensive than Wirtz at 8.1 million. So that's another thing I could do, but it requires a downgrade elsewhere, maybe Dembele to Elise, for example. But I would have to be very conscious about how I manage to integrate those changes. But those are some possible modifications I'm looking at. But that midfield is still looking very solid. And the same goes for the front three. In this starting 11, of course, it's just Kane and Mbappe. So it's a 3-5-2 for the starting 11. And the way you want to structure your squad is having your players who feature last on your bench, and you can bring them on for those who have not done that well. So you take off your low scoring players for those yet to play, and you maximize your chances of getting points. And the same goes for the captaincy. You basically just put the armband on the player who features first and then keep switching it until you get it right. You have so many opportunities in the round of 32. So I would highly recommend to not use the maximum captain booster right now. I think it's much better to use the qualification chip or even the clean sheet shield, which could be used at any point, to be honest. I think that could be very profitable in any given stage of the tournament. Now, on my bench, I've got some big hitters. Emi Martinez, who is a very expensive goalkeeper in World Cup fantasy terms, at 5 million, facing Cape Verde. I've got a triple up in Argentina with none other than Lionel Messi. Yes, he's on my bench, but I'll bring him on for one of the lowest scoring players in my starting 11. And I've also got Medina, who was benched and rotated on Matchday 3 for Tagliafico, but I think Medina is now the starting left-back. He was very impressive in the first couple of games. He is a centre-back by trade, but he's doing a good job on the left-hand side. The other option is Munoz, versus Ghana. I think having one Colombian player is still worthwhile. They could face Argentina in the quarterfinals, but even their round of 16 potential fixture isn't too shabby. So I think Daniel Munoz is a great pick, one of the highest scoring defenders in the game. Only Laporte has more World Cup fantasy points than him. And I think this squad has a nice balance to it. There are a few triple ups, of course, with Argentina, France, and England, but the rest is quite evenly balanced and allocated, in my opinion. Although you might have a different perspective. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But Vinicius Jr. will be my first captain, and then I'll switch it to the player who features next. I could even bring in a Canadian option like De Figueroles, a 3-point family defender, and I can captain him first, but ultimately, with the likes of Mbappe, Kane, and Messi, I don't really see myself sticking with a 9-pointer if that's what he ends up getting, any of these defenders with scouting bonus. And if you look at my 50-man squad, I actually don't have that many scouting bonus players. Konsa is one of them, and Manzambi is the other, but everybody else has more than 5% ownership. So you can tell right now I'm not obsessed like maybe I was on Matchday 1 with having these pure differentials, and it becomes increasingly more difficult to get scouting bonus players as you get deeper into the World Cup, but it's still possible, and it can be very profitable as well. You also get additional points for a goal outside the box or from a free kick. So it's not like UCL Fantasy, which is outside the box, to be fair. But Messi, for example, scored against Jordan from a free kick. You get an additional point for that, and scouting bonus gives you 2 additional points, which is very important at times, but it's not the be-all and end-all, as the likes of Daniel Munoz have proven. But can you get any better than Kane, Mbappe, and Messi up front? I don't really think so. And they are 3 of the best captaincy options, and they are certainly Golden Boot contenders. And so is Vinicius Jr. and even Ousmane Dembele at the moment, both on 4 goals apiece. But Lionel Messi leads all players with 6, and he is the greatest player of all time, at least from what I've seen. And yeah, everyone will have their own opinion on that as well. But I want to show you a few different aspects. So I'll delve into the ownership figures of these players specifically, then a few alternative options I'm considering in every single position. Even the goalkeepers, I could make 2 changes between the sticks, but ultimately everything will be locked in my Matchday 4 deadline stream later today. There are still plenty of differentials in my squad. Magnan has 8.9% ownership. That isn't too high, even for a goalkeeper. Freeman has 7.4%. Konsa is a scouting bonus eligible player with 3.2%. Cucurella is template with 27.5%. Bellingham is still going under the radar a little bit, but after that haul against Panama, I think a lot of people will gravitate towards him, especially with England facing Congo in the round of 32. And Manzambi is still a good choice. I don't think Algeria will be a walkover for Switzerland, but you would back the Europeans to advance to the round of 16, and I think Manzambi could be crucial to that. Ousmane Dembele now has 23.8% ownership. Before the hat-trick, I think it was half that, so he's gaining a lot of traction right now. And the same goes for Vinicius Jr. I bought him when he had maybe around 10 to 15% ownership, maybe before that, to be fair. I've been quite bullish on Vinicius for a while now, but I made a big mistake at the beginning of this tournament going for Rafinha, and in the end, he was a big letdown. Of course, injury played a huge part on Matchday 2, but sometimes you need a bit of luck to go your way. I started this tournament with Florian Wirtz, and he got 5 points against Curaçao, and ultimately I sold him for Matchday 2 anyway, but I need a bit more from him, and I just don't really see him being a locked-in pick. Out of this entire 50-man squad, I would argue Wirtz is probably the most expendable and disposable. There's a good fixture in Paraguay, who, once again, is a very solid team and tough to break down at times, but they conceded multiple goals against USA on Matchday 1. I think Germany could still do something similar, but it's about time Wirtz gets in on the action when it comes to the goal scoring on top of the creativity. Harry Kane has 40.6% ownership, and Mbappe is, I think, the most owned player in the game, almost 60%. Lionel Messi is going up as we speak at 41.2%. Medina is just under 10% ownership, and it's not an absolute guarantee he starts, by the way. I wouldn't be completely shocked if Tagliafico was the left back for the game against Cape Verde, but I think it will be Medina who has earned his spot for sure. And Daniel Munoz is still at 11.1%, which is very interesting against Ghana. If he remains below 15%, I think that could be huge to win your mini leagues and rise up the rankings, even if he doesn't qualify for the scouting bonus, of course. Emi Martinez is a very template goalkeeper at 30.4%. But I do like Pickford, and you're going to see some alternative picks in the next section. But what I also want to show you quickly is the dates, just so you have a visualization of how I structure my starting 11 and the bench. It's not going to be like FPL where you put your sort of favorite 11 in, irrespective of when they play, and you just go for those that you think will score the most points, and you order your bench in such a way where if anyone misses out, you can then have automatic substitutions. You want to be in control of your 15-man squad by making them manually and switching to captaincy, of course, as I discussed previously. But Magnan plays on the 30th of June. Emi Martinez is towards the very end of matchday 4, so that's why he's on my bench. Freeman, Konsa and Cucurella all play between the 1st and 2nd of July. I've got Bellingham and Kane, of course, on the 1st. Manzambi plays quite late on the 3rd of July as well. Ousmane Dembele and Mbappe on the 30th of June. Vinicius is the first player who features. Florian Wirtz is going to be a few hours after, so that's why I'm going to captain Vinicius, and then afterwards I can captain a German player. Whether that's Wirtz, Kimmich or somebody else will be confirmed later today. And then you can see I've got Messi and Medina who play on the 3rd of July, and Munoz is on the 4th, so we have to wait quite a while for that Colombia versus Ghana game, but it could be worth it for the likes of Diaz and Munoz in particular, and they've got a few scouting bonus opportunities elsewhere, but I still think it's worth spending the extra millions on the Colombian wingback who has got 2 goals already in this tournament. But I'm very happy with the setup at the moment. There's a good mixture of clean sheet potential, also tackles in some cases in the midfield, although I wouldn't say that's the main reason I've got Bellingham, but he's done it on 2 occasions in this tournament. I think with the rest, to be fair, it's more about goals and assists, but we need a bit more from Florian Wirtz in particular, and you just can't beat Kane, Mbappe and Messi in my opinion. You've got alternatives like Oyarzabal, even Cunha is coming good right now with 3 goals in the last 2 matches, but I still think this front 3 will be competing for the Golden Boot. And these 2 goalkeepers should go quite far in this tournament, and France could face Argentina in the final once again, and I think one of them will reach the semi-finals minimum, maybe even both, and there are a few other options I've got in mind which will be highlighted right now. If you want to spice up things a little bit, Unai Simon and Jordan Pickford would be very good alternatives instead of Emi Martinez and Magnan. Defensively, I wouldn't mind having Medina and Lisandro Martinez, so you still double up on the Argentina defense against Cape Verde, but you have 2 defenders out of the 5 spots. I'd still keep Daniel Munoz, to be fair. I'm not saying he's an absolute lock, but he's very close to being in that sort of category. And I think Kimmich could do very well against Paraguay with a clean sheet and possibly an attack and return. And if you're using the qualification booster, I'd back the Germans to advance. So that could be a very good haul from their right back and captain. Therefore, Garoles would give you another captaincy option for the first game of matchday 4 between Canada and South Africa. Lamine Yamal cannot be sort of discounted. I think he's a very good option in that Spanish attack, and so is Oyarzabal up front. Vargas could be the alternative to Manzambi and the Mecha over Florian Wirtz, but there are a few other midfielders I'm looking at. Vinicius is probably locked in for me, and Japan's going to be tough for Brazil, and that's why I'm not too keen on their defenders, but Danilo and Douglas Santos, as long as they stay below 5% ownership, would still be solid, and Elise over Dembele to fund some other moves as well. But Dembele is looking a bit sharper in this tournament, particularly with the goal scoring, and that's why I'm probably going to spend the extra millions on the Ballon d'Or winner. But instead of Vargas and Nemecha, let's go for something like this. With Leandro Trossard, who has been very impressive in this tournament, he has created multiple chances in every single game, and he finally got the fantasy points on matchday 3 against New Zealand. But with this, I can keep Manzambi and go for Trossard and still have, well, 0.3 million in the bank. So that's not too shabby, in my opinion. But what I don't like about Trossard is the fixture. Senegal are not going to be easy. They might only have 1 win and 3 points in this tournament, but I still think they're one of the best third-place teams to advance to the next round. So Belgium could be knocked out here. And if you're using that qualification booster, I'm just not entirely sure on having Belgian coverage, but it's between him and Kevin De Bruyne for sure. And if Trossard stays below 5% ownership, then he could be a massive differential for you, but don't force it just for the sake of it. If I had to go for any other forward instead of Kane, Mbappe and Messi, I think Cunha would be one of the first names I'd consider, and probably Oyarzabal for the Austria fixture in particular. But then, if Spain were to advance, it's either Portugal or Croatia. That's not going to be easy either, and it could be another low-scoring game. So as much as I like Spanish assets like Yamal and Oyarzabal, some Spanish games could be very low-scoring, as we saw against Uruguay and even Cape Verde. So I think their defense is more appealing with Unai Simon, Laporte, and Marc Cucurella. So that's why it's more likely I'll have a Spanish defender or goalkeeper compared to midfielder or forward. So those are my thoughts for Matchday 4. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. And thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then be sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, not just for World Cup Fantasy, but also FPL and UCL Fantasy going into next season. Let's get this video in particular to the 200 likes as we close in on 45 subscribers on YouTube. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description. My Patreon and the championships, fair likes to my videos, proud to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the World Cup Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you in a couple of hours' time for the Matchday 4 deadline stream, and stay tuned for more content throughout the summer.